Joining us now, Kelly Ward Burton, president of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. Hey, Kelly, when it comes to map drawing, some states hand that duty over to independent commissions, but in other states, it is controlled by the legislature, which, of course, then leads to partisan maps. What do you expect the process to look like in Republican-led states in a year where, as we were just talking about, they're also pushing restrictive voting laws?
It's a really good question, and thanks for having me. It's really important that we all understand redistricting in the context of this fight to protect our democracy. Just as you were discussing, the same forces that are pushing these voter suppression laws in the states are the same forces that are going to manipulate our democracy through gerrymandering so that the outcome of our elections are predetermined before the voters even get a chance to have a say at the ballot box. And we have done a very good job over the course of the last decade moving the power for redistricting out of the hands of Republican trifecta control, which is where it was in 2011, where Republicans had total control over the process, to something else. And as you noted, there's a lot of states now that run their redistricting through commissions or with some type of reform that checks the people drawing the maps. Because we've done such a good job, though, moving that power structure, we really need to hone in on the 4 big states that are still controlled by the Republicans and watch for them to gerrymander. And those 4 states are Florida, Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia, which, following the census numbers this week, have 94 congressional seats just in those 4 states. And so we have to watch diligently, and we really need to think about redistricting in the context of the voter suppression that we are seeing in these states right now.
Well, let's talk about one of those states. Let's talk about North Carolina. And I want to pull up this map. It's North Carolina's former 12th district, once the most gerrymandered district in the U.S. Can you talk us through how a district ends up looking like what you are seeing there in the bright green?
Sure. Well, what Republicans do is they pack us Democratic voters into as few seats as possible so that the voters that tend to vote Democratic are in just a handful of seats. And in North Carolina, for the vast majority of the decade, you had 10 Republican seats and 3 Democratic seats because of that packing of voters, particularly voters of color, into as few seats as possible, so that they essentially give they make those seats very safe, and then they take the rest of the state to be safe Republican seats for themselves. And in a state like North Carolina, which, as we all know, is a 50-50 state by all standards, you have a congressional delegation that was 10 Republicans and 3 Democrats, regardless of what the voters wanted in that state. So we actually filed a lawsuit. Oh, please, yes.
No, please tell me about the lawsuit.
Well, we filed a lawsuit in 2019 against that map, and we were successful in making the map slightly more fair. It was now an 8-5 delegation with 8 Republicans and 5 Democrats. But we think that with this new redistricting process, it actually should be a 50-50 map on a 50-50 state. And what a fair map is in North Carolina should be closer to 7-7, where there are districts in the states that both sides, Democrats and Republicans, could compete for, and that the outcome of the election is really determined by the voters in the election, not predetermined by the maps, by packing a handful of as many of the voters, particularly voters of color, into as few districts as possible.
So, Kelly, I just want to zoom out for a second, because you have Senate Democrats hoping to pass their version of H.R. 1 later this year. It's sweeping elections reform legislation. I mean, how would that affect the systems and processes that we're talking about?
H.R. 1 is an incredibly consequential piece of legislation for our democracy writ large, and also for redistricting. What it does is it creates independent commissions in every state for congressional elections, meaning that the redistricting process for congressional maps has to be done through a commission, which is more fair than a partisan drawn map. The maps that come out of commissions are more fair, they are more responsive to the voters, they more accurately reflect the electorate in those states. H.R. 1 would create commissions in every state. But in some ways, even more important than that is that H.R. 1 would eliminate partisan gerrymandering. It would say you can no longer partisan gerrymandering. It is not acceptable. It is not legal. And it would create a standard that would check the states and prevent the partisan gerrymandering like you saw in that map in North Carolina. So it's incredibly important. We're very supportive and we're very hopeful that, that the Senate can get it done.
Kelly, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.